Welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed your break and some lovely conversations with one another. Next, we have our second panel, entitled Living Islam and Muslim Engagements with the World, chaired by Professor Jonas Otterbeck, and featuring Anusha Ali, Saad Barcha, Hossein Mousavi, and Farhan Feroz. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And for those of you who do not know me, I work at the AKU-ISMC as a professor in Islamic studies. I have a lovely panel here with 4 speakers, and I'll do like the previous session. I'll simply read the introduction of each participant who have, for your convenience, lined up in order. What? Oh, no, sorry. Almost in order. So, Anusha Ali. Anusha's academic career started with a thesis that focused on spaces of imagination, formed and found at thresholds of the real and unreal, an interest that led her to GPISH. She explored human imaginary through folk tales and is currently learning ways to transform this foray in the imaginary into a visual language. And you be Saad. Yeah. Saad Barcha. Saad is dedicated to exploring the rich tapestry of diverse cultures in the Muslim world and the unraveling culture intricacies through dwelling into language, poetry, and music as avenues to understand and celebrate the multifaceted beauty of these societies, offering fresh insights into the vibrant heritage and fostering cross-cultural understanding. Hossein Mousavi. Hossein is a philosophy graduate student with a background in Islamic intellectual history. He joined ISMC in September 2022 to explore the diverse aspects of Muslimness, particularly in the interplay between politics and culture. His MA thesis dwells into the social identity of Islamist grassroots in Iran. And finally, Farhan Feroz Ali. Farhan graduated as a designer in 2015, worked 5 years in the field of architecture in Pakistan before joining GPISH, and is currently studying history of art and the architecture of Islamic Middle East. His interest lies in exploring embodied aesthetics and devotional practices in South Asian region. Now, without further ado, please, Anusha.
Thank you for the great introduction. My research is based on folklore and its audiences, a case study of Hir-Ranjha through the works of Bullah Shah. So my inquiry here is in terms of the role of the human imaginary and how it interacts with narratives, how it interacts with the meaning-making processes that individual human beings have, and how the imaginary itself, as found in individual and communal narratives, evolves over time. One of the focus, imagination, as the most fundamental aspect of human cognition, and which is learned and nurtured, which is the basis of this research. Folktales became one of the most crucial points to apply this research into imagination, as their longevity and the fact that they evolve constantly over time across geographies and in communities means that they interact with cultural imaginaries at a fundamental level and have continued to do so, which makes them quite apt for researching how the human imaginary has evolved. So they have shared concepts and phenomena, and they draw upon a pool of cultural consciousness. However, studies on folklore often consider them to be dusty artifacts. They are looked through for their origin stories, where they come from, what the intent of the first teller was, what the first community was doing. But that's not the end of the life of a folktale. they continue to be used today. They're continually resituated and retold, as Dr. DeCaro terms it, and that means that the thread of imaginary has continued to evolve. They're not tales of the past, and studies, the gap in scholarship that I found here was that they consider a lot of these folk tales to be artifacts of the past. They don't seem to apply a methodological framework that considers their contemporary evolutions and the multiple existences that they have. So the phenomena of their interaction with people today, how people 4 generations from the origin of the tale are still interacting with it, and what they imagine when they hear the tale or read the tale, and how it is different from the initial interpretations and much of the scholarly literature that already exists. My study, I located it in the South Asian region, which again is one of the largest gaps that I found in scholarship. For the case study, I used the tale of Hir-Ranjha, which is a popular love tale. It is a tale that is known in the vernacular, and it's familiar to people even if they don't fully understand the intricacies of the tale, but they have become part of the cultural language almost. And this was particularly important because all the studies that have been done on Hir-Ranjha seem to be done on social issues of the time that it was first written. Other scholarly inferences about the religio-political climate and interpretations of the people who've done it later. And these are all to discover the intent of the writer, the intent of the multiple creatives who have involved themselves. They do not consider the impact that these retellings have had on the audiences who have continued to listen to these tales and visualize these tales, because Hir-Ranjha is existent across film and cinema and is present in the written and sung and visual culture of the South Asian region. So for this study, I used 6 copies of Bullah, who is one of the tellers of the tale. He doesn't tell the tale fully in these copies, but he builds upon an existent knowledge of the tale. He uses their names, and he talks about things that happened to them, and uses these to communicate other things. And one of the other reasons I use these copies was that they're popular today. They're still sung, and they're still part of pop culture. So people, many people appear to be familiar with them, which was one of the base points of how I would conduct this study, because it was to be about contemporary imagination. So one of the most fundamental things was how I would elicit this imagination, how I was going to find a way to ask people questions that were not directed, were not biased, were not telling them what I wanted to hear, and were not interpretive. So I didn't know what I was going to find through this. I wasn't attempting to arrive at an answer. I was simply attempting to understand the process by which the imagination was working in these people, and what meanings were being generated as they came into contact with tales and cultures and lived experiences and their own realities. So as this was a work of literature, I started with a literary methodology, which was reception theory by Rosenblatt and Iser, and which indicates a transactional relationship between the reader and the text, that the reader is casting onto the text their own meanings, that the text and the reader interact with each other. The text does not tell them anything. It is the reader who infers from the text. And that became one of the grounding assumptions, that the work of literature does not communicate. It is the reader who communicates, and that this engagement is mediated by imagination, feelings, emotions, all of these things. So in this research, I was not even attempting to compare audience reactions with suppositions, interpretations, translations, or any correct authoritative pieces that exist on what this piece or what this folktale is supposed to mean, or even with each other. The point was not to arrive at answers of what they were thinking, but rather to understand how they were thinking. So again, to keep this research unbiased and undirected, I used a free associate method and a combination with naturalistic inquiry, which basically meant that I provided the copies, I provided the texts, but I did not provide translations. These existed in their language, Punjabi. This narrowed down the participant pool, but I didn't provide explanations, I didn't provide translations, and I did not ask them to explain to me what these meant. I didn't ask them to interpret these. My questions revolved around the participants. What it made them think of, what imagery came to mind, what were they familiar with, and what stood out to them, how they were connecting the dots of what they were reading. So, and the conversations often led to paths that I didn't begin with, and I wasn't aware I would find. So it was a very naturalistic sort of a movement. And when I analyzed this data, I was analyzing ways in which these people, these participants were making links, patterns of thought process, patterns of meaning making, how it was being shaped, what influences there were, where they found familiarity, and how from their own knowledge base and from their own cultural understanding, they were understanding things that they had encountered or not encountered. And then through that, the idea was to understand how the cultural consciousness was being shaped today in the contemporary age. So this is a basic background of the participants. Some of them had, once upon a time, academically engaged with the folktale and the text and the poet and the kafis. Some knew of these songs through popular culture. Others had not interacted with it altogether. They simply knew of Hir-Ranjha and the category that it belonged to South Asian folktales. I'm providing an example of one of the kafis that I analyzed. There were 6 of them, and the analysis was much longer. But this was Ranjha Jogira Ben Ayoni. So 2 of the observations, one was according to the term jogi, and they each had different understandings of the word. But it was interesting to see where these understandings were coming from. Some were coming from pop culture and cinema creations of Ranjha, which were then associated with the term jogi. So Ranjha became the definition of jogi because of the pop culture visualizations of him. Others, in fact, knew of academic understandings of the word, so they were defining jogi through the lens of previous scholarship. And then they were explaining to me that this is who Ranjha was. Others still were extrapolating from lived experiences. They had encountered in their daily lives times where somebody had been called a jogi, or definitions of people who were supposedly called jogis. So for them, this was coming from somebody they had encountered. And that is what became Ranjha. And there were a lot of other personal, linguistic, and cultural associations which found resonance, familiarity through context, the icons. And each of these were depicting the fact that the reader's function eclipsed the text, as well as the folktale itself. Their imaginary was speaking from an array of sources, from cinema, from experiences, from lives, from stories they had told, from language itself and how the language had changed. So what I understood from all of this is that the socially constructed memory became the imaginary that they were using to interact with the text. And each time they read them, in fact, they were inferring different meanings. Someone sang it out to me, another saw a feminist icon in here, and there were a lot of aspects that they expanded on, which were not in the text that I provided. In fact, they were coming from their own knowledge. These were not them responding to the text, but this was their entire consciousness. And which indicated that it's a collage that they create. One of the interesting things was that they often attempted to locate their meanings within other imaginaries, other scholarships. So if somebody knew of another scholarship that had interpreted this kafi, they would, rather than tell me what they thought, tell me what that scholar had written. So it's almost as though authoritative imagination supplants individual imagination, which led to the idea that such an explorative methodology, which asks for reflections first, could maybe generate knowledge rather than simply regurgitating knowledge. If one is provided with a piece of literature and is asked what they think of it and what they understand from it, rather than being provided interpretations of what everybody else has thought of it and what scholarship has written of it, we might perhaps come to a point where people can interact more from their own understanding and their own imaginaries become paramount rather than just repetition of knowledge processes. And that's it. Thank you so much.
So, thank you, everyone. So, through the lens of performance theory and the theory of collective effervescence, this research offers insights into the transformative powers of Qawwali for both the performers as well as the audience. Now, by examining how Qawwali has been used as a form of spiritual awakening and collective experience, this research tries to demonstrate how it has the power to transform individuals and communities. So, what Qawwali is, starting off with an introduction to the type of music. It's a form of Sufi devotional music that originated in the Indian subcontinent. It is a traditional form of music that has been performed over 700 years in the Indian subcontinent and to this day remains central to the mystic traditions of South Asia. It is characterized by its melodious and spiritual lyrics accompanied by powerful and rhythmic music. Qawwali has long been a part of this culture, used to convey messages of love and unity, using repetitive models, metrical musical patterns, and vocal improvisations, which create a trance-like state in participants and allow them to connect with the divine. This connection is known as hal, or spiritual intoxication, and is seen as a crucial aspect of the Qawwali experience. And the lyrics themselves often focus on the love of God and yearning with the divine union. Now I will discuss the performance theory of Richard Schechner and Victor Turner and Emil Durkheim's theory of collective effervescence. And I will try to analyze the tradition of Qawwali through these lenses. So first of all, performance theory provides itself a framework for understanding how performance can be used to create a space for communication and transformation, and is a way to understand the processes of religious or cultural experiences. The term performance itself attempts to explore ideas of religious activity more fully in terms of the qualities of human action. It is rooted in the idea that performance is a form of communication that has the power to affect social, cultural, and political change. Interpreting certain rituals as performances, however, necessitates understanding performance as incorporating both the actors as well as the audience involved, and rather than just a separate performer and an uninvolved audience. This theory looks at how performances can be used to create a sense of meaning and belonging among its performers and audiences. The first theory is Richard Schechner's performance theory. In the field of performance studies, Richard Schechner's performance theory is a widely cited and influential approach to understanding the phenomenon of performance. Schechner's theory is based on the idea that the performance is a complex phenomenon that involves multiple elements and processes, and that these elements and processes can be both creative and transformative. This theory argues that performance can be seen as an intricate system of interaction between the performers and the audience and the environment, and that it can be used to create meaningful and powerful experiences. He also states that when a performer is engaging in a live performance, they are engaging in a transaction between the performer and the audience, as well as between the performer and the material. Now, according to Schechner, the act of performing is itself an experience that can be transformative. This is due to the unique liveness of a performance, which creates a unique context for the performer and the audience. Also included in his definition of performance is the necessity of people being present to serve as witnesses to the event. These ritual performances, which are watched by everyone present, are where meaning is shared and specific transformation and experiences are possible. So this was his ideas of performance and his performance theory. Now let's look at Qawwali, how Qawwali fits into his performance theory. Qawwali falls into the category of the experiential performance as categorized by Schechner, as it is rooted in improvisation based on the nature of the audience. Experiential performances, according to Schechner, are open-ended and allow for the possibility of unplanned, spontaneous moments. Qawwali is often performed in conjunction with Islamic rituals and ceremonies, such as at Sufi shrines during festivals, and they're rooted in the tradition of zikr, which is a form of spiritual chanting that is meant to bring the participant closer to the divine. This spiritual element is reflected in Qawwali's call and response style of singing, where the singer improvises and the audience responds. This improvisational nature of Qawwali is an important part of its categorization as an experiential performance. It is largely composed in real time, where the performer is calling out and the audience is responding with a refrain oftentimes. This call and response structure allows for a back and forth dialogue between the performers and the audience, creating a sense of connection and community. The Qawwali performance, each one is like very unique and fluid, and the audience is always encouraged to join in with singing and hand claps to be a part of the experience. And this improvisation allows the performer as well as the audience to engage in a poetic dialogue, creating a sense of connection, which can often lead to a shared understanding of the music. The fundamental objective of the performer, the lead Qawwali, is to sing the songs, the Qawwali, in response to the spiritual requirements of his audience. His goal is to make his audience more spiritually awake, which could result in ecstasy or mystical arousal. Now, the Qawwal takes this job very seriously. It's his obligation that the Qawwali entails towards his listeners, and is fully aware of the important role he plays in these proceedings. Moving on to the next performance theory provided by Victor Turner. His performance theory brings attention to the important role poetry, art, and music play in understanding of culture and human experiences. He believes that what is deemed ritual or as a ritual or a social drama has a unique ability to generate knowledge and evoke emotions for humans, thus having a significant implications on our culture construct. His theories on ritual and performances provide a useful framework for understanding the transformative powers of Qawwali. His approach to performance studies encourages exploration of symbols and their meanings in order to understand behavior and assist in understanding of how rituals or performances influence our understandings. Now, according to Turner, rituals and performances have the ability to take individuals out of their everyday lives and transport them into a liminal or a threshold space. In this liminal space, individuals are able to let go of their normal social roles and hierarchies and experience a sense of what he calls communitas, or known as unity with the others. We can also see that Turner's work on performative rituals emphasizes the depth and significance of events that enable the piercing of the ordinary world membrane, bringing perceptions that some would term as spiritual, some would name religious, and others would describe as a heightened consciousness of one's own being. Now, through performance theory of Victor Turner, if we analyze it, the structure of Qawwali, we see that the use of Sufi poetry in Qawwali performances have symbolic meaning that adds to their transformative power. Sufi poetry often deals with the themes of love, devotion, and the search for spiritual enlightenment. As Regula Qureshi states, that the main means of expressing and disseminating mystical thoughts and experiences is through Sufi poetry, which is the root of the Qawwali lyrics. Well, in fact, Sufi poetry, which makes up the song texts of the Qawwalis, is not perceived separate from the music itself. So Qawwali, in essence, is the musical interpretation of these texts. These texts share a unique poetic style that is rich in imagery and metaphor, which previous generations of Sufi poets have imbued with a wealth of extremely complex symbolic material, giving it a strong connotational and associational value. As such, Qawwali performances can serve as means for individuals to connect with these themes on a deep emotional level and experience a sense of transcendence. The use of these traditional music along with such poetry obviously contributes to evoking these emotions. One way in which Qawwali music creates this liminal threshold space, as mentioned by Victor Turner, is through its use of repetitive musical structures, such as the call and response style between the lead singer and the rest of the group. This repetition between the lead singer and the rest of the group has a trance-like effect, allowing individuals to let go of their normal thought patterns and enter into a state of heightened awareness and emotional connection. Another aspect of Qawwali that contributes to its transformative potential through liminality is the use of musical improvisation again. It allows for a sense of spontaneity and unpredictability in the performance, and breaking individuals out of their normal predictable routines and opening up to new experiences and emotions. This spontaneity and unpredictability in the performance can lead to moments of intense emotional connection and catharsis for both the performers and the audience. And the next theory is the theory of collective effervescence by Emil Durkheim. The transformative powers of Qawwali can also be seen through the theory of Emil Durkheim. His most influential theory is obviously the collective effervescence theory. This theory fundamentally examines how collective emotion and shared rituals can help define a group's identity and create social solidarity. In order to understand his theory of collective effervescence, it's first important to understand the idea of collective consciousness. Durkheim describes collective consciousness as the shared beliefs and values that individuals within a group hold. He believed that this consciousness is further argued. He argued that collective consciousness could be strengthened and reinforced through collective rituals and shared emotions. Durkheim referred to this phenomenon as collective effervescence, which he defined as an intensifying again of collective emotions. Well, simply put, collective effervescence occurs when individuals come together and engage in shared rituals that produce and strengthen shared emotions, beliefs, and values. This feeling of collective ecstasy, feeling of oneness with the collective, could manifest in the form of a shared spirit in which individuals are swept up in a passionate frenzy, united with their common beliefs and values. Now, Durkheim was particularly interested in the idea that through shared rituals and collective emotions, individuals could momentarily transcend the boundaries of their individual identity and become a part of the greater whole. Now, Qawwali is a particularly powerful example of this collective effervescence in action. The unified singing and the dancing that accompany Qawwali performances create a sense of shared pleasure and passion that can be transformative for both the performers and the audience. As the performance advances, the music gradually builds its intensity, and the audience begins to become emotionally invested in the performance. This intense vocal performances, poetics, lyrics, and powerful instrumentation all contribute to the emotional intensity of the performance, creating a combined emotional experience among the audience. Audiences often join, as mentioned before, in singing, clapping, and dancing, and even call out to the singers in appreciation. This sense of collective engagement contributes to the feeling of collective effervescence, allowing the audience to experience a sense of unity and transformation. It fits in the definition of collective ritual perfectly, as it is typically performed in a large gathering of people, often in mosques and in open-air courtyards. The lyrics of Qawwali typically focus on religious and spiritual themes such as the love of God, importance of prayer, devotion, unity, and the power of faith. This religious content allows the audience to connect with a higher power, further contributing to the sense of transformation and unity. So At the end, like to bringing this to conclusion, this research tries to yield results about how Qawwali can be amalgamated with performance theory and how the performance theory can help us understand the dynamic transformative effects of Qawwali. However, it's also important while doing this research, it was important for me and for us to understand that, consider the limitations of applications of these theories to Qawwali, because there are often criteria to categorize a performance as a performance, and oftentimes it's difficult for us to understand fully through empirical knowledge these abstract and transcendental experiences of the performance as well as the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me in such a novel conference. Today I will explain how Ibn Khaldun employed the term essential accident, a concept rooted in Islamic philosophy, in an unprecedented manner. His unique approach extends its conventional application, and this also highlights the methodological implication of the term essential accident. In Arabic is awarid dhatiyya. Before I start, I should mention that I was going to cover both cases about Ibn Khaldun and Muhammad Abduh, but for the time management, I just focus on Ibn Khaldun and mention a citation from Muhammad Abduh at the end as an example. My analysis will encompass definition of essential accident, methodological implication of essential accident, extrapolation by Ibn Khaldun, and the significance of extrapolating the doctrine of essential accident. According to Aristotle and his followers in Mashai philosophy school, like Ibn Sina, Farabi, and Tusi, there is a difference between two types of attributes of an object or thing, essential and accidental. Essential attributes define the very nature or essence of a thing. Without them, it's logically impossible to conceive that thing. In contrast, accidental attributes are incidental. A thing might or might not possess them. Their absence doesn't make the conception of the thing logically impossible. Consider a triangle. Its essence involves lines. Being a triangle necessarily means having lines. Therefore, line is essential attributes of a triangle. Essential accidents are a category of essential attributes. In the following two slides, I will discuss the methodological implication of such doctrine, the difference between essential attributes and accidental attributes. A core component of the research method is what is commonly referred to theoretical framework or conceptual framework. The theoretical framework The theoretical framework has four main characteristics. First, the theoretical framework establishes the foundational assumptions that underlying a research study. It serves as a guiding principle. Second, the theoretical framework provides a set of ideas and concepts that make thinking about, questioning, and observing the research object possible for the first time. Through the framework, certain phenomena can become problematized and or worthy of investigation in the first place. Third, after the data is categorized and analyzed, the theoretical framework guides the final explanatory step. It offers a lens through which the researcher can elucidate why something exists in particular manner or behave in particular manner. And last, theoretical framework justify why the acquired knowledge is valid and sound. Now, when we unpack the doctrine of essential accident, which I defined, it reveals four fundamental assumptions. I mean, accepting such difference, such doctrine, entails accepting the following propositions. First, object possesses an intrinsic essence. This essence is determined and necessary, existing independently of human will. Second, it is within the realm of human capability to understand and grasp the essence of objects, or approximately try to. Third, human sensations and sensory organs are inadequate for grasping unchangeable, essential, and necessary truth. Only the intellect, operating autonomously and not contingent upon other sources like myth, hadith, scripture, and customs, is equipped to approach and comprehend objects' essence. And the last proposition, the true knowledge, sound knowledge, is necessary knowledge. The criteria test for understanding objects as they are, it means a necessary knowledge, lies in cognizing their essential accidents and attributes. Although Muslim philosophers did not place the problem of method at the core of their work in the same way early modern philosophers did, they, however, recognized the methodological importance of the doctrines of essential attributes and accidents. This indication comes from the way the doctrine of essential accidents was employed to define science in Mashai philosophy. The essential accident is pivotal in determining what makes a research truly scientific, according to Mashai philosophers like Ibn Sina. This is illustrated by Ibn Sina's assertion: the subject matter of every science is what a science discusses about its essential accidents. Now a question rises. I've often pondered whether Muslim scholars outside the realm of Islamic philosophy have intentionally and deliberately applied this principle as their theoretical framework in their inquiries. What principle? The subject matter of every science revolves around its essential accident. By framework, I mean whether Muslim scholars deliberately applied this rule along with belief in those prepositions about object's essence. Object's essence, human capability of their cognition, the limitation of sensory organs, those four. I know that it requires more comprehensive study, but as of my current understanding, apart from its routine application, this rule, in the field of usul fiqh, there seems to be a lack of deliberate employment of this principle in other disciplines. This scarcity of utilization is precisely what makes the contribution of Ibn Khaldun and his legacy cited by Muhammad Abduh so remarkable. Now we're turning to the case of Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun not only applied the methodological rule of essential accident, but he also insists that investigating the essential accident of societal change and Umran, civilization, is the method to prevent illusion and achieve sound knowledge. His main argument is as follows. A, conditions and events in society have essential accidents that can lead us to their causes. B, at the end of the 14th century, Muslim societies faced different crises. New crises mean new conditions, new people, new changes. Therefore, the new condition requires new investigation because they have new essence. To prevent illusion and false ideas in the way towards understanding the cause of changes, we should be aware of necessary rules governing the Umran. It means their essential accidents. Why I call such argument in Al-Muqaddamah extrapolation of this doctrine and why it is so significant. First, for the first time, Ibn Khaldun used this principle for worldly affairs specifically addressing welfare and prosperity. He took this term beyond the realm of philosophy, theology, and fiqh, making a groundbreaking claim that matters of welfare, umran, and social life possess determined and objective essence, and these can and should be explored by our intellectual faculties. Second, Ibn Khaldun did not just mention these in passing. His emphasis on paying attention to essential accidents as a method of avoiding illusion and achieving sound knowledge is more explicit than before. And third, fast forwarding to modern time, we see that Ibn Khaldun's unique take on the term essential accident has inspired scholars in the context of reformism. They called for a revival of his project and quoted his use and his employment of the essential accident. For example, we have two examples here. Muhammad Abduh explained that the internal and domestic reason behind the collapse of Muslim societies is that Muslims fail to recognize the rules governing social and political issues are universally applicable and not subject to variation from one society to another. And after he mentioned this point, he quoted the paragraph from Ibn Khaldun that he used essential accident term. The second example is from Muhammad Behjat al-Bitar, one of the author of Al-Minar magazine. He used the term essential accident to stress the urgency for Muslims to understand the reasons behind societal decline. He credited Ibn Khaldun for pioneering this line of inquiry, emphasizing his focus on the essential accident of Umran. But he also warned us that although Ibn Khaldun innovated this new field of investigation, essential accident of societal changes, Muslim scholars have not paid as much attention to rules governing everyday life as they have to those governing Sharia norms in Usul al-Fiqh. This sentiment echoes the point I mentioned about the first significance of Ibn Khaldun extrapolation. Ibn Khaldun brought the concept of essential accident into discussions on everyday matters. Thank you.
Pictures worth 1,000 words. Do you all agree with that? Yes? No? Maybe? That a complex idea can be conveyed very simply through a single image. And bigger the image, bigger the impact. So far, so good? Okay. So my presentation, I don't have a title for my presentation, and this will make sense, I hope, towards the end of it. But what I'm trying to do today is conduct an experiment which has to do with visuality, experience, and the invisible in Muslim material culture, especially in South Asia. Some terms I'll try to explain before I move on. What I mean by experience is the engagement of body in our context, that is, all our senses that engage with the surroundings and take feedback from it. From invisible, I mean, talking about Muslim cultures, I mean God, angel, jinn, Satan, etc., that are not visible to human eye. And South Asian Muslims, because my study is in that region. Moving on, what I mean by visuality, because that seems to be the key word here. What is visuality? Mitchell, one of the very well-known authors in this discipline or anti-discipline, explained visuality as the social construction of vision and the visual construction of the social. That means that context, social norms, it inspires, dictates, or sort of teaches us how to see or what to see. For example, in Muslim, actually I'll get to example later, and what one sees or how they see it shape their own context or shapes their own societies. Okay, example now would make sense. So the relationship between me and the audience, the speaker and the audience. In this setup, the audience expects to see the presenter's face, gestures, what they're saying, the content I have to present. This is a social condition. We are trained to see in a certain way. But if this was a support group, we wouldn't be standing or we wouldn't be situating like this. We would be sitting in a circle so that all of us can see each other's faces. I won't be the one talking, everyone would be the talking. That's a different social condition. So the way social setups work, they shape different visual setups. I is not automatic. That's generally the acceptance that I is very automatic. Yes, it is mechanical, but the way I sees, that's not automatic. There's much more to it than just mechanics. If that's making sense, then I'll start with my experiment. The first thing that I'd like to talk about my experiment is the idea of erasure. I'll try to explain what I mean by erasure through two examples. First is an example of a famous artist called Willem de Kooning, and another artist called Robert Rauschenberg, who took Willem de Kooning's painting and basically erased it. If you see rudimentarily, it seems like it's a disrespect of the artist, but Rauschenberg explained that it was not actually a disrespect, but it was a celebration. He was celebrating the artist by creating an artwork through his own piece. The first question, why de Kooning? Because he was famous, he was recognized, and his work was known as art. Okay, so the way he erased it, he did not erase the painting completely. He left certain marks on the canvas after he was done erasing. He framed it, and then he put up in an art gallery with his own name. So it was framed and signed, Robert Rauschenberg, my work, my painting. The agency of audience comes into play then. What the audience sees is Rauschenberg's name on a painting. They understand it to be his work, and the painting they see is his work, not the work that was originally there. And they start putting meaning on that painting. It was a blank canvas, but the audience is putting meaning on it, very similar to what Anusha was talking about in her first presentation. The second example of erasure, the Yakunjara tribe, it's a very difficult name to pronounce, sorry, they erased their paintings from their sacred sites. Their sacred sites were under attack by, not colonial, but developmental authorities who wanted to make more commercial plots in their sacred sites. So they went to their sacred sites, they desanctified them, they erased, desecrated their own paintings. What they did was that they took agency in their own hands. They did not let anyone else do that for them. They took agency in their own hands. And the act of erasure, act of putting those images out of commission, basically made those images and the act more important in their imagination. So what I mean to talk about in erasure is that the thing that has been erased needs to have a meaning beforehand. If it does not have any significance, then there's no point of erasing it. What remains of the blank canvas, the audience applied the meaning onto it. The blank canvas does not really have meaning of itself. It's the audience that's applying meaning to it, which shifts the artwork or anything that of the object to imaginative centers. It's not a physical object anymore. There's nothing there. The art or experience happens in imaginative centers, and the meaning changes the way the thing is portrayed. For example, in terms of the painting, it was portrayed in a gallery, so it was understood to be a painting, but it was really not a painting. So this is what my experiment is. I took an image from a journal article, and I started erasing it. You may ask what the subject matter of this was, where it's coming from, what's the provenance, and you'll notice that it's very oddly paced on this slide. That was done intentionally. I've not composed this image on the slides. I have not put any labels to say what it is, but I've just let it be. But before I move on, this should not be confused with iconoclasm that is generally practiced in some faith-based communities, because iconoclasm is erasing of faces. This was not a face that I've erased, it was an architectural site. Now, what are the implications I intend to draw from them? There are three. Number one, vitrines, the glass boxes we see in museums. There is a mechanical reason to them, of course, because these are objects of significance, so people don't want them getting destroyed, people don't want them touching, so they put them behind a glass box. But putting them behind the glass box is taking them away from the natural context. This is a picture from British Museum, and specifically of the Islamic objects from Islamic world. All of these objects have been taken away from their original or natural context and placed together in a very unnatural manner. These objects were not really, some of them were not really objects. For example, wall tiles are not really objects, they are wall tiles, but with them being put in these vitrines, they become objects of gaze. Number two, the labels that follow. There are always labels with the glass boxes that tell you what you're looking at or how you should be looking at them. So you're not really looking at the object itself that has become an object, but you're looking through the text. The text is telling you what you're looking at. So it is basically an epistemic layer that tells you what is behind it. Journal articles work in a very similar manner. It's more subtle, of course, because we're so used to it, we don't see what they're doing, but they're doing very exactly the same thing. You see these images taken out from a journal which talks about Quranic manuscripts. Quran is not an object. It's much more than just an object, but when put in these journals and with these labels and everything, it becomes an object of gaze. And finally, photography. Camera is generally understood to be a dumb copying device, but it is not, because we forget that it's a human that is operating the camera. And when we talk about humans, we're talking about positionality, the person who's taking the picture and the person who's viewing the picture. And because cameras are considered to be dumb copying devices, photographs are considered to be visual evidence of reality. But are they visual evidence of reality? I'll give you an example of here, this AKC building. This is a selective perspective of AKC, which does not really show the whole of the building or whole of the area. It just shows this part. Now, if I were to take a picture now, it wouldn't be the same. So photography, or the image produced, is very temporal, it's very transient. It is not total reality. So with that in mind, I present this image again. What I've done is I've removed everything that is guiding the eye to see a certain thing in this image. This image has been sort of sanctified through desanctification. The epistemic or visual expectation is foregone, and now you can look at the image for what it is. Part 2 of the experiment, and I'll give you a minute to try and read what's on it. So this is how I began my second experiment. Very close to our Khan Center, there used to be, I'm not sure if they're still there, Camden Art Center. An artist called Victor Burgeon had a show which he called The Room. So again, instead of putting up pictures, thank you, he put up text. I don't think that's very readable, but text, as in connotational text, was asking viewers to think of something. The text was not telling what it is, but asking the viewers to think of something. So in his opinion, art became a psychological or imaginative act. It was not a visual act anymore. So I played with this idea, and this is something what a lot of scholars of Muslim material culture also talk about. They talk about the idea that senses, other than sight, are more important, that imagination plays a vital role when you're talking about Muslim material culture. Because as late Shah Ahmed talked about, the Muslim culture is always interacting with the invisible. It's not just visual, it's the lack of visual that perhaps is more important in Muslim cultures. And it's, even if you look at the tradition, the Sufi tradition, the imagination, or al-khayal, has a great importance. It is seen as the threshold between the seen and the unseen, between human and the creator. And there are many examples in Sufi tradition. For example, the idea of Miraj, which Michael Sell says that talks about Sufi circles, that Miraj is also understood as imagination of the Prophet. And some Sufis, for example, Abu Yazid Bistami, has also recreated this idea of Miraj in his own, recreated in his own journey. Similarly, Professor Kamal Abudib talks about Surat al-Rahman and how imagination becomes very important when we're talking about these visual creations. And imagination is accessed through taste, al-dhawq. That is, as Ibn Arabi states, there is the first principle of revelation. And what is taste? It is the sensorial engagement with the world. It's understanding what the world is about. For example, taste is just not through the tongue, it's also through the ear. That sweetness and sound is the tasting of the voice, so on and so forth. So imagination is through the senses, and from imagination back to senses. So it's a continuous cycle that keeps going on. And finally, this was the image I started with. So you can see on the right, that is the architectural image I started with, and I started erasing it, and I added more layers to it in order to basically to suppress the visual elements and talk about the experiential elements that exist within the space, the shrine of Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai. I feel that it was a sanctification of the space. It was a performative way of expressing what Muslim material culture can be, and that photography has to be very, photographers have to be very careful in what they're photographing and how they present these in, well, journal articles and other sources of knowledge. And that's about it. Thank you.